My name is Raymond Kowalski. I'm 67 years old. I spent 32 years as a civil engineer, built roads and bridges across New South Wales, raised 2 children with a woman I loved more than I knew how to say out loud. My wife passed 8 years ago. Breast cancer. Daughter, quick and cruel, the way it always is. After she died, I made a mistake. The kind of mistake a grieving man makes when he's too proud to admit he can't manage alone. I let my son move in. His name is Gerald. He was 38 at the time. He'd been between jobs, that was how he described it. Between jobs. Like it was a temporary bus stop rather than a permanent address. His wife, Tanya, came with him. And their 2 children, my grandchildren, Poppy and Lachlan. Poppy was 7. Lachlan was 4. I told myself it was good. That the house would have noise again. That I'd hear little feet on the floorboards, and it would hurt less. For about 6 months, it did. Then, things started to shift. Small things, at first. Gerald asking to borrow money that never came back. Tanya rearranging my kitchen, my lounge, my bedroom furniture, always with a bright smile and an explanation I hadn't asked for. My tools disappearing from the shed. My mail being opened before I saw it. I said nothing. I told myself I was being difficult. That grief makes you territorial. That these were small prices for company. Then Gerald sat me down one evening and said he thought it would be best if I moved into the granny flat out back. He said the kids needed more space. He said I'd be more comfortable there. He said it like he was doing me a favor. The granny flat was a converted storage room. 12 square meters, a single bed, a bar fridge, a plastic chair, one small window that faced the back fence. I want you to understand something. That house was mine. My name was on the title. I had paid off that mortgage in 1998. I had built the back deck with my own hands in 2003. My wife had planted the garden along the left fence, roses and lavender, the kind she liked, and I had watered them every second day since she died, because it felt like the least I could do. I moved into the granny flat because I was 63 years old and exhausted with grief, and I did not yet understand what was happening to me. That was 4 years before I made the phone call that changed everything. His name is my brother. His name is Walter Kowalski, 3 years younger than me. We had not spoken properly, not really spoken, not the way brothers should in nearly a decade. There had been a falling out over our mother's estate, old money, old anger, the kind of wound that hardens into silence if you let it. We had let it. But I still had his number. I had never deleted it. Maybe some part of me always knew I might need it. The night I called him, it was almost midnight. I was lying on the single bed in that 12 square meter room with the bar fridge humming beside me and the sound of Gerald and Tanya watching television through the wall so thin I could hear every word of their program. I had not eaten a proper meal in 2 days. Gerald had started controlling the grocery budget. Tanya had told me, politely, that meals would be family only from now on, given the expense of feeding 4 people. I was apparently not part of the family. I had been out of my own house for over a year. I called Walter, and when he picked up, I couldn't speak for a moment. I just held the phone and tried to find the words. He said my name, Raymond, and I started to cry. I'm not ashamed of it now. I was 66 years old and I was crying in a box room in my own backyard at midnight. And my brother was the only person I could think to call. I told him everything. It poured out of me like water through a cracked pipe. The granny flat, the money, the grocery situation, the way Gerald had started talking to me like I was a tenant behind on rent. The way Tanya smiled at me in front of the grandchildren and spoke differently when they weren't in the room. The fact that Gerald had mentioned, twice now, that perhaps I should think about signing over the property title to him for tax purposes, he said. For simplicity, Walter listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a long silence. He said, "Ray." I told him he didn't have to. He said he knew he didn't have to. He said he was coming anyway. Then he said something that has stayed with me since. He said, "I'm sorry it took you this long to call, and I'm sorry it took me this long to be someone you could call." He drove up from Melbourne. 12 hours. He arrived the next morning. But here is where Walter did something I would not have thought to do myself. He did not come to the front door. He called me on the phone from the street and asked me to come out quietly, without telling Gerald or Tanya. I came out through the side gate. I remember the way he looked at me when I walked out, the way his face changed, and I understood for the first time how I must have looked. I had lost weight. I hadn't been sleeping. I was wearing the same shirt I'd had on for 3 days because I'd been avoiding going through the main house to the laundry. Walter took me to a cafe 2 streets away. He bought me a full breakfast. He sat across from me and asked me questions, careful ones, and he wrote things down in a small notebook. He asked me who else knew about the title conversation. I said no one. He asked if I had kept any records, any texts, anything in writing from Gerald. I said I had a few messages on my phone. He photographed them all. He asked me if I was willing to do something that felt uncomfortable. I said I'd been uncomfortable for 4 years. He said fair enough. His plan was simple in outline and very difficult in practice. He wanted to spend time in the granny flat, himself, as me. He wanted to see firsthand how Gerald and Tanya behaved. He wanted to build a picture. He is a retired solicitor. He knew exactly what kind of picture he needed. We look alike, Walter and I. People have said so our whole lives. Same build, same gray at the temples, same way of standing with our shoulders slightly forward. He'd grown a beard in recent years that I didn't have. But he shaved it off in the car park of that cafe, using a travel razor he'd apparently packed, which told me he'd already decided before he drove up from Melbourne. I drove his car to his sister-in-law's place on the Central Coast. Walter moved into the granny flat. What happened over the next 11 days? I know mostly from what Walter told me afterward, and from the recordings. He had brought a small device, an audio recorder disguised inside a power board. He placed it near the granny flat door. Within 24 hours, it had captured Gerald explaining to Tanya, in a normal conversational tone, that the old man would sign the transfer eventually, that he just needed more pressure, and that once the property was in their names, it would be worth well over $1.2 million at current prices, and they could move to Queensland, and the kids could go to a good school. Walter told me that when he heard this, sitting on my single bed in my 12-square-meter room, he had to stay very still and very quiet for several minutes. On the 3rd day, something happened that neither of us had planned for. Poppy knocked on the granny flat door. She was 11, now 4 years had passed since Gerald first moved them in. She knocked lightly, the way children do when they're not sure they should be there. Walter opened the door. She looked at him for a moment and frowned. Children are perceptive in ways adults underestimate. She said, "Grandpa, you look different." Walter and I love him for this did not lie to her. He crouched down to her level and said quietly, "I'm your grandpa's brother, your great-uncle Walter. Do you remember me?" She would have been a toddler when Walter and I stopped speaking. She shook her head. He said, "Your grandpa Ray needed some help. I'm here to help him. Can you keep that between us for a little while?" Poppy looked at him for a long time. Then she said, "Is Grandpa Ray okay?" Walter said, "He's going to be." She nodded. She came back later that evening with a biscuit she'd taken from the kitchen and slipped it under the granny flat door without knocking. Walter told me about this when it was all over, and I had to step outside for a while when he did. On day 6, Gerald came to the granny flat door and told Walter, believing he was speaking to me, that he had arranged an appointment with a property solicitor for the following Thursday. He said it would be quick, just a formality, just getting the paperwork in order. He used the phrase, "while you're still sharp enough to sign things," which Walter told me he delivered without apparent awareness of how it sounded. Walter said he'd think about it. On day 8, Tanya came. She was more sophisticated about it. She brought tea. She sat in the plastic chair and talked about the grandchildren, about Lachlan's swimming carnival, about how much the kids loved having family around. Then she said that she and Gerald had been doing a lot of thinking about the future, about what was best for everyone, and that it would give them all such peace of mind if the property question was settled. She said the word peace 3 times in 4 sentences. Walter listened to all of it, said very little. The recorder got everything. On day 9, something shifted. Gerald, apparently frustrated by the lack of progress, stopped the pleasantries. He came to the granny flat door at 7 in the morning and told Walter in a flat, cold voice that if the transfer wasn't signed by the end of the month, he would be arranging for a medical assessment, and that he had spoken to someone who could facilitate having me declared incapable of managing my own affairs. Walter said he understood. After Gerald left, Walter called me. I was sitting on the Central Coast with a cup of tea and the ocean visible through the window when my phone rang and my brother's voice said, "Ray, we have everything we need. It's time." He had already made calls. A solicitor colleague in Sydney who specialized in elder law. A social worker through a community organization. He had printed copies of the audio transcript and sent the recordings off-site. He had also, quietly, spoken to Poppy's school through an anonymous inquiry to understand the family's situation there. I drove back the next morning. We did not do what Gerald expected. We did not arrive with anger or confrontation. We arrived with paperwork. Walter had arranged for his solicitor colleague to attend. They came to the front door together, Walter, the solicitor, and a representative from New South Wales Elder Abuse Helpline at 9 in the morning on a Tuesday. Gerald opened the door in his dressing gown. His face when he saw Walter, and then, behind him, me watching from the path, went through several expressions in about 2 seconds. Confusion, recognition, understanding, and then something that looked very much like the ground shifting beneath him. The solicitor was professional and calm. She explained that Raymond Kowalski, the registered owner of the property, would be resuming occupation of the main residence effective immediately. She explained the nature of the recordings that had been obtained and the legal implications of the conduct captured in them. She explained that an application had been prepared for a financial abuse protection order and that the property transfer documentation Gerald had arranged had been reported to the relevant authority. Gerald started talking. He talked a lot. He talked about misunderstandings and context, and how much he'd sacrificed moving up here to look after his father, and how ungrateful it was to do this to him. The solicitor let him finish. Then she said, "Mr. Kowalski, the recording from the 8th of last month captures you stating, verbatim, that your father would sign while he's still sharp enough. Do you wish to continue this conversation here, or would you prefer to speak to your own legal representation first?" Gerald went quiet. They were out of the house by the end of the week. It took 3 months for the legal process to work through. Gerald retained a solicitor of his own, who wrote several letters that Walter described as creative. There were moments of genuine difficulty. Gerald contacted relatives who took his side without knowing the full picture. Tanya called me twice, once to cry, once to threaten. I let both calls go to voicemail and passed them to Walter's solicitor colleague. Poppy, through all of this, sent me a card. She had drawn a picture of a house with a garden. Along the bottom she had written in her careful 11-year-old handwriting, "I knew you'd be okay, Grandpa Ray. I have that card on my kitchen bench now. I will have it there until I die." The matter was resolved without a court hearing. Ultimately, Gerald agreed to a formal undertaking: no contact, no further attempts to influence my financial affairs, in exchange for the financial abuse complaint being handled through civil rather than criminal channels. His solicitor clearly advised him that the recordings made a criminal matter inadvisable. He and Tanya moved to Queensland. I was told this secondhand by a neighbor. I did not ask to know more. Mine, Lachlan, I do not see. He is too young to understand and too young to have a choice. Poppy is in a more complicated position. Her parents have moved her to a new school. I have written her a letter through a family member that I hope reaches her. I told her that when she is old enough to make her own choices, I will be here. I am back in my house now. I sleep in my own bed. I have rehung the photographs that Gerald took down, he said. They were cluttering the walls. My wife's roses are still alive. I've been nursing them back. It turns out lavender is tougher than it looks. It turns out roses are too, if you're patient. Walter stayed for 3 weeks after it was over. We ate dinner together every night. We talked about our mother, about the estate, about old words said in old anger. We did not resolve everything. Some things are too old to fully resolve, but we said what needed to be said and we let the rest of it go as best we could. He is my brother. He drove 12 hours because I cried on the phone at midnight. That is more than enough. There are things I wish I had done differently. I wish I had not waited 4 years. I wish I had understood sooner that discomfort and shame are not good enough reasons to let something wrong continue. I wish I had known that there are people solicitors who specialize in exactly this. Community organizations that exist specifically for this, who can help before it reaches the point mine did. If you are watching this and something in this story feels familiar not as a story, but as a life, please know that what is happening to you has a name. It is called elder financial abuse, and it is far more common than most people realize. In Australia alone, it is estimated that 1 in 6 older people experience some form of abuse, and financial abuse is among the most frequent forms. Most perpetrators are family members. You do not have to be in physical danger for this to be serious. Having your mail opened without permission is serious. Being pressured to sign documents you don't fully understand is serious. Being made to feel like a burden in your own home is serious. There are services. In Australia, you can contact the Elder Abuse Helpline in your state. You can speak to a solicitor who specializes in elder law. Many offer a free first consultation. You can speak to your GP, who is a mandatory reporter in many circumstances. The most important thing, the thing I want you to hear is this: you are allowed to ask for help. Needing help is not weakness. It does not mean you are no longer capable. It does not mean you are a burden. It means you are a human being in a difficult situation, and human beings in difficult situations deserve support. I called my brother at midnight because I had run out of other options. I am grateful every day that he answered. But you should not have to wait until midnight. You should not have to wait until you have run out of options. Talk to someone. Today. Before it goes further. The roses can come back. The lavender is tougher than it looks. And so, I promise you, are you. If this story meant something to you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it.